Hello there, I'm Martha Van Dam, and this is Living Beyond. And welcome back. We're having our little talks about anxiety right now. This is number 2 in the series of talks. And last time, in the last talk, we talked about how quick overview, we talked about how what we want to do is we want to clearly we'll recognize when we're feeling anxious. We talked about something we could do to help ourselves not feed the anxiety. We talked about how we're going to change our relationship to anxiety, not try to get rid of it, but change the way we deal with it and change our relationship to it. We actually also talked about how anxiety has a role and a purpose, and that's our brain trying to protect us from something it perceives to be dangerous or wrong or bad. And then I gave you a couple of specific things to do to help bring yourself back to the present, away from the fears of the future or the regrets and sadness of the past, back to the future where we actually really are okay. And I gave you a couple of things to do, the deep breathing, and then the naming some things to help ground yourself to the present. So today, what we're going to talk about is exactly what's happening in your brain and in your body when you feel overwhelmed with stress, creating this sense of anxiety. And it's really helpful if you have an understanding of what's happening, because that will help you to stop fighting it, and it will help you to work along with it so that now we're not fighting our own brains. So when your brain perceives, or my brain perceives, that something around us is a threat to us, and we must remember our brains are really good at picking up potential threats, but they're not that great at always knowing when something is a true threat or not. So, and you see this example with maybe a soldier who's been deployed and they have some PTSD. Well, they hear thunder and their brain tells them immediately, boom, you're in danger. And they are covered in all the emotions back from when they were in theater and war. And so that's the brain perceiving that thunder was actually a risk. And the brain is mistaken clearly at that point. Well, you and I have the same things that go on. Someone will speak sharply to us, and it may trigger into our mind some memories that we have hanging out back there from some things in our past, sometimes that we were humiliated or we felt abandoned, or just bad things happened to us, and our brain can pick up this, take in information from this new event and can connect it to the old one, and then it sends us off on this path of all the anxious feelings. But we're not feeling anxious feelings just from what's happening in front of us. Our brain has reached back into history, and it's giving us a charge as though that historical thing is happening again. Very, very similar to PTSD. So our brain is observing all the time, and when it picks up something that says we may be at risk, then it's going to give us this charge. And when that happens, what the brain is doing is it is kicking into gear the sympathetic nervous system. That's the one that's in charge. You've heard this forever. That's the one that's in charge of your fight or flight or freeze. And now people have added in fawn. So it is the one that's responsible for our fear response, our trauma response. And when that happens, brain perceives some threat, some risk. It kicks in the sympathetic nervous system. The nervous system tells our brain to release these hormones. So that's when we release the cortisol, the stress hormone. And that's when we release the adrenaline. And guess what? How does an increase of cortisol and adrenaline make us feel? Whatever it is that you feel when you feel anxious and stressed out, that's what it feels to you when your cortisol and your adrenaline has been released into your system. That's what it feels like. Many people will feel a pounding or a tightness in their chest. Some people will feel tightness in their jaw, a flushing, a heat in their face. Some people will feel tightness in their hands or sweaty palms, nauseous stomach, or just tight stomach. I always feel it first in my stomach, and then it moves up to my chest. So where do you feel it? Wherever you feel it, that's where you feel it first, that's your first clue that your sympathetic nervous system has gotten kicked off. And a benefit for you is if you can learn to recognize that earlier and earlier and earlier in the process, the sooner you're able to take those deep breaths we talked about yesterday, the sooner you can kick in the parasympathetic nervous system and soothe things down, slow things down. But here's another piece of this. When that sympathetic nervous system gets kicked off, it is preparing our body to do whatever our body is going to need to do to protect us. So it's giving us extra energy in our arms and legs in case we need to fight. This is the one that makes me laugh. It's giving us extra energy and blood flow to our jaw in case we need to bite someone. I just think that's funny. But we get all this rush of energy in these different parts of our body. Even if you're freezing, you still have had this rush of blood flow to the arms and legs. Blood flow is cut off from a lot of what is going on internally. That's why you kind of feel nauseous or you don't want to eat. Everything comes to a standstill. Food's not moving through real well. And so what happens in our Western culture when the thing that scares us is not really frightening? When that happens, our mind is perceived that we're in danger. We get this rush of chemical in our system, but there's no fight to fight. There's no run to run. There's nothing to bite. And so we have all this extra energy in our body, and we're feeling all the results from all that tension, the anxiety of those chemicals being released. So there's a way we can work with our body to help this piece of it. Unfortunately, if you get kicked off at work in the middle of the day at work, you may not be able to do what I'm going to suggest to you right away. But if you can do it at some point in time in your day, it will help you. So remember, your body has prepared you to fight, but you're not fighting. I mean, you and I may have literally just opened an email that made us feel anxious, but clearly we don't have to fight anything. It was just an email. But our body is sure prepared for it. So what I'm suggesting you do is something that's called completing the stress cycle. And completing the stress cycle means our body prepared us to do something physical. So now we do something physical, and that works all of that adrenaline and cortisol out of our system. It makes us feel so much better. So anything that involves using the long muscles, the arms and the legs, and particularly like an aerobic sort of exercise, that is going to work those chemicals out of your system. And when you're feeling all tense like this, your body wants to get rid of those chemicals. So what is something that you can do relatively easily at the end of the day, or even in the middle of the day, if you can get out and do something like at lunchtime, if you've gotten stressed during the day? And here's kind of what I'm thinking about. Can you get out and take a brisk walk? Can you get on a bicycle and take a ride? Can you, at your office, can you go outside and do an intermittent fast walk? That walk where you walk really quickly for a minute and a half, and then you back off and you walk just a regular pace for 30 seconds, and then really fast for a minute and a half, and then back slow again. That is if you do that for about 15 minutes, which literally is only about 8 sessions of walking quickly, you're going to work those chemicals out of your system, and you are going to feel so much better. So today's lesson is find a way to complete the stress cycle when you've gotten triggered with something that is stressful, because your body is prepared, it is ready to fight. And in our culture, we very rarely are actually fighting. So unless you're being chased by a bear, unless you're having to fight off a mountain lion, then actually what you just need to do is go home or go outside during the middle of the day, take that brisk walk, take a little run, take a bike ride, take a swim if you have access, do something that forces you to use your arms and your legs, your long muscles, to work out that adrenaline